Hello and welcome back to my channel What If Deku 2O. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today, we're kicking off part 1 of our series, What If Deku Was Teleported into the World of Despair? If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is AceAkuma from FanfictionNet. All the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now, let's dive into the fanfic. In a world full of supernatural human beings, capable of many feats that an ordinary human being cannot do, as people started to call them quirks, where heroes and villains fight in order to gain one over the other. But of course, where there are heroes, there are also heroes in training. At UA, a hero school full of inspiring young heroes, but one student who's worked hard to gain his position where he is now. Enter Izuku Midoriya, Class 1 student, and the successor of All Might, the #1 hero. Training to save everyone with the power he was given by his mentor, he strives to protect everyone with his classmates, but a sudden turn comes around in his journey as a hero. Will he succeed and light the darkest hours, or will he succumb to the dark? Izuku's room. In a dark void stood a boy no less than 16 years of age. He had green messy hair and freckles that formed diamonds on both sides of his cheek. With his bright emerald eyes, he scanned around the void, asking questions inside his head. This boy is Izuku Midoriya. "Hello? Anyone there?" the boy cried out. But no response was given back to him, as he tried to wander around, but only to stop to hear a faint voice. Izuku then halted as he turned to find the voice. Then the voice became transparent but audible. "Please don't die," the voice cried out. Izuku then looked towards the voice. He couldn't help but feel sad, despair, and regret coming from the voice. In his soul he knew that the voice was crying for help. Izuku then ran towards the voice that was calling for help. As Izuku kept running, he heard another, but this one was familiar. "Ninth, your path is a hard one. Persevere, fight, and save. That is the power that has been passed on to you," the voice called out to him. Izuku then kept running as he saw a glimpse of light and a figure standing before the light. It seemed to be a feminine figure as he saw her hair wave as she was standing there. Izuku was closing in as he brought out his hand as he tried to reach her. The figure turned towards Izuku as it muttered, "Izuku," the voice muttered. Izuku then reached for her hand, but then the floor collapsed as they both fell, entering the deep void. Izuku desperately tried to reach for her hand as he kept falling. Izuku. Izuku. Izuku then abruptly opened his eyes as he started to breathe heavily. He stared into the ceiling as he was now in his room filled with All Might merchandise. He then slowed his breath down and started to calm down. "What was that? And who was that?" Izuku muttered. Izuku then lifted himself off the bed he was on as he looked at his alarm. 8:35 a.m. Izuku then widened his eyes as he was going to be late for class. He then got up and dressed into his uniform with the white shirt, red tie, and the gray UA blazer. He then slugged his backpack over his shoulder and dashed out of his room. He rushed down the stairs as he saw Ida and Uraraka waiting for him. "There you are, Midoriya. Hurry or we'll be late," Ida warned. Izuku took a deep breath. "Sorry I slept late." "Are you all right, Deku? You look kinda pale," Uraraka pointed out. Izuku shook his head. "I'm fine. Let's hurry before Aizawa-sensei scolds us." They both slipped on their shoes and headed towards the school building. During the League of Villains attacks, they were forced to live in dorms in order for the teachers to protect their students. They were only to exit campus if they needed essentials or were doing hero work studies. At Classroom 1A, all 17 students were present except for the 3. But in the nick of time, they both arrived just in time before the bell rang. All 20 students were now present. As the 3 breathed heavily, a boy with spiked-up red hair walked up to them. "Whoa, you guys were cutting it close. What happened?" the boy asked. Deku slept in late for some reason, Uraraka explained. The boy then looked surprised. You alright, man? That's highly unusual for you, dude. The boy showed his concern towards the greenette. Izuku smiled. I'm fine, just slept in late. Don't worry, Kirishima, he reassured the boy now named Kirishima. If you say so, man, as they all went to their respective seats. A man with long baggy hair and a gray scarf wrapped around his neck walked through the door. The man that entered was none other than Shota Aizawa, aka Eraserhead. Izuku then leaned on his desk as he looked at the board. He couldn't pay attention to Aizawa because of the weird dream he had. The woman in his dreams kept flashing in his mind as the first called out to him as well. Who was that, and why was she asking for help? Why do I keep having these weird dreams? Mido. Why did the first show me that? Midori. Does it have to do with All for One? Midoriya. Was it someone that the first cared about? Midoriya. Izuku then jumped as he turned towards his teacher. Quit daydreaming over there, Aizawa called out. Izuku then blushed in embarrassment. Sorry, sensei, as he kept his head low. Class then continued on from there, as Izuku had to put his mind into class as Aizawa was telling them important news. As lunch came around the corner, Izuku sat at the table with his friends, but he wasn't eating his meal. He kept staring at his bowl of katsudon. He just kept wondering about the dream he had. Midoriya, are you all right? The boy next to him asked. He then jumped and looked at the boy on his right. The boy had multicolored hair of white and red. His eyes were heterochromatic as one eye was gray, the other blue. This boy was named Shoto Todoroki, as Todoroki looked at his friend with concern. You haven't touched your bowl for a while now, Todoroki told him. He's right. Is something bothering you, Ribbit? As the girl in front of him joined in the conversation. The girl had long green hair, and at the end of her hair was tied into a bow-like figure. This girl was named Asuitsuyu. Todoroki's question then gained the attention of the other two as well. Midoriya, if something is bothering you, you can depend on us, Ida called out. Izuku shook his head as he smiled. Sorry, just a bit tired lately, don't worry about it, as Izuku then started to chow down in his meal. But that didn't stop the others from looking at Izuku with concern. As all of them both finished eating their meals, Izuku then stood up first. I'll be right back, guys, Izuku told them as he walked away from the group. As Izuku walked through the halls, passing by students were either carrying papers or just chatting with other students. Then Izuku stopped in front of a door. He then knocked on the door. Come in. As Izuku then opened the door to see a very skinny tall man sitting down on a couch with a cup of tea in his hands. The man had hair that split into his bangs that were hanging down. He had baggy eyes. Oh, young Midoriya, what can I do for you? The man said, surprised to see Izuku. Izuku then sighed. There's something I need to talk to you about, All Might, Izuku answered his question. As Izuku sat down on a chair, facing his mentor. All right, kid, what did you want to talk about? All Might questioned. Izuku then took a deep breath. I met the first again. All Might stopped what he was doing and looked at Izuku with a surprised look. Again? What was the reason? All Might looked concerned as he questioned Izuku. I don't know, but he wasn't alone, Izuku continued. All Might then raised an eyebrow. Was it one of the predecessors? Izuku shook his head. It was a girl. She was asking for help, but I don't know why, Izuku answered. All Might then placed his hand on his chin. A girl. Did you see what she looked like? Izuku shook his head. She was covered by light, so I only saw her shadow, Izuku explained. Izuku then drooped his head. But it sounded like she was in pain. Izuku solemnly looked at the floor. All Might gently smiled at the kindness the boy displayed, knowing full well that this boy would go to lengths to save someone. But he then slowly frowns as he thinks about Izuku's dream, a mysterious girl. Maybe the predecessors are trying to tell him something. Whatever it is, young Midoriya will be prepared for the worst. You trained so hard to get where you are right now. I'm sure, with your classmates, there is nothing that you guys can't overcome, All Might reassures Izuku. Izuku smiled and nodded. Right. Anyways, you should go back to your friends. They must be worried, All Might told Izuku. Izuku nodded and got up from his chair. See you later, All Might, as Izuku walked to the door. All Might waved. Izuku placed his hand on the doorknob but stopped. He then turned to All Might. Thank you again. All Might smiled and shook his head. Izuku then opened the door and left the room. As soon as Izuku left, All Might then looked at the cup he was holding. What are trying to tell him? First, he muttered. Lunch. With his classmates worried about their fellow green friend, they went to find him, but just in time Izuku came back. Sorry guys, I'm back. I just had to get fresh air, Izuku tried to reassure them. Ida looked at Izuku with concern. Are you sure you're all right, Midoriya? Izuku smiled as he nodded. He was still questioning the dream he had, but he knew that his friends were worried about him. He couldn't stay like this forever. As they went to head out of the lunchroom, the bell rang for the next class to start. USJ. As Izuku and Class 1A arrived at the USJ, fully dressed in their hero costumes, as Izuku wore a green jumpsuit with black stripes that wrapped around his sleeves, he wore arm bracers that was to his biceps all the way down to his wrist. He then wore gloves that had 5 yellow holes on the knuckles and a contraption around his wrist. He also wore leg guards that reached down to his ankles and wore iron soles. As they entered the facility, they saw Aizawa standing in front of his class. Behind him was the collapse zone, buildings destroyed and hung over, almost ready to collapse on the ground. All right, for today's class, you'll be finding a civilian in the rubble of the collapse zone. 5 civilians will be hiding in the rubble. You'll be split into 5 groups. Each group will have their own civilian to save. You'll have 20 minutes before the session is over. Is that understood? Aizawa informed them. No one questioned the situation as everyone intently listened to their teacher. Good, the first group is. As Aizawa listed the groups, the people started to find their teammates except. Why the hell do I have to pair up with Deku? A boy with spiky hair with red eyes shouted aggressively. This boy is named Bakugo Katsuki. The group was Jiru, Kaminari, Bakugo, and Midoriya. Izuku's sweat dropped at the angry Pomeranian boy as the boy in question gritted his teeth. Aizawa ignored the boy and turned his attention towards the class again. All right, you have 20 minutes to find your civilian. Here are the locations that they have been spotted. Now go, Aizawa ordered. As they rushed in towards the collapse zone, Izuku's group ran towards the location they were given. It's good to work with you, Midoriya, Kaminari grinned as he lifted his thumb up. Izuku nodded as he activated 8% 1 for all full cowling and dashed off. Bakugo then unleashed his explosions and followed behind Izuku. Before the exercise started, Aizawa gave them each communicators. All right, well, split up from here. Tell us if you find anything. Jiru tapped into her communicator. Bakugo, Midoriya, you take that side and we'll take this side, Jiru ordered. Right, Izuku responded. Why the hell do I have to team up with Deku? Bakugo muttered, as Izuku's sweat dropped. As they arrived at their location, they started walking forward, looking at buildings that were jagged and decayed. As Izuku was looking around, Bakugo stopped him. Oi, Deku, he called out. Izuku turned as he looked at Bakugo. Did you make any progress yet? He asked. Izuku widened his eyes, but then smiled. Yeah, I have. I can do long-range attacks now. I'm not falling behind Kaken, Izuku answered. Bakugo then scoffed. Ha, just because you learned that doesn't mean you'll surpass me, damn nerd. Bakugo then walked ahead of Izuku as Izuku looked at Bakugo and smiled. We'll see about that. As Izuku and Bakugo walked for a few minutes, they saw a purple light come from a building that was still standing. It appeared to be on the 6th floor. Izuku and Bakugo were then alerted as they headed towards the building. Izuku, thinking it was the civilian, He then activated OFA 8% again and tried to go up the building, but Bakugo stopped him. Wait, something is not right. Bakugo cautiously stepped forward. Izuku then alerted as well. He then got into a stance. Then out of the blue, a figure flew out of the building. Izuku and Bakugo then widened their eyes as the figure landed 10 feet away from them. Where the hell am I? He said that I was supposed to grab someone, but all I see is 2 brats. The figure had a pompous voice as he scoffed. He also wore a brown cloak that concealed who he was and what he wore underneath. Bakugo smiled. Who the hell are you? The man then grinned. Oh well, I guess I'll have fun. Izuku then tapped into his communicator. Jiru, Kaminari, come in, we have an intruder. Before Izuku could finish, the man appeared before him and tried to throw a fist at his face. Izuku instinctively dodged his attack and rolled to the left. Izuku then got back up and went to put his arm up as the man was already on him. Bakugo then sped towards him and released an explosion at him, causing the man to skid away from Izuku. Midoriya, what's wrong? Did something happen? Aizawa's voice came through the communicator. Izuku was surprised to hear his voice, but shook that aside. Aizawa-sensei, there's a villain to the location we are at. I don't know how he got in here, but Kaken and I are holding him off, Izuku informed. Hold on, 13 and I are coming. Don't do anything rash. We have your communicator tracked, Aizawa informed. Izuku then nodded as he looked towards their assailant. Bakugo then smashed his hands together as explosions sparked on his hands. Ha! They better get here before we pulverize this guy, Bakugo smirked. Izuku then got into his stance and put his hand out, as he held middle finger in. Then he activated 20% through his fingers as he fired compressed air pockets that launched towards the man. Surprised by the move, he swiftly moved to the right and dodged the projectile. He then dashed towards Izuku, but Bakugo intercepted him by flying above the man and in smooth motion plummeted down on him as he detonated his explosions on top of him. The man dodged just in time as he moved to the left and skidded away from the explosions. But Izuku predicted this as he was on the man's left. He then lifted his right leg and swung it across his head. Greg! The man grunted as he flew to the side. Izuku then pursued him as he jumped above him. He then proceeded to fall as his right leg was lifted up high. The man quickly shook his head as he looked up. Izuku was coming down quick. All he could do was bring his arms up to block it. Manchester smash. As he smashed his leg on his arm, making a crater below him. The man smirked. I guess I'll bring you with me. Izuku widened his eyes, but before the man could do anything, Bakugo came speeding towards the man as he launched a massive explosion. The man flew back as he rolled. Deku, we're going to finish this guy, Bakugo called out. Izuku nodded as he brought himself to a low stance. I'm getting tired of this. The man vanished in an instant, leaving a purple particle behind. The boys widened their eyes. But in the corner of Izuku's eyes, he saw a purple particle appear behind Bakugo. He then moved quickly as he pushed Bakugo away. As he did that, the man appeared in front of Izuku as he latched his arms around Izuku. Bakugo looked horrified when he saw Izuku get grabbed by the man. As soon as the man had Izuku into a hold, a purple light flashed underneath them, as it started to form what looked like an 8-trigram. Deku! Bakugo shouted as the man and Izuku started to get swallowed up by the 8-trigram. Izuku tried to get out of his grip, but he had a tight hold on him. Aizawa came to the fray as he saw Izuku getting sucked in by a portal. Aizawa then flashed his eyes as it started to glow red, as he was going to erase a quirk. But nothing happened as it kept engulfing the two. Midoriya! Aizawa shouted. Izuku looked at his teacher, then saw Bakugo rushing towards him. Deku! Then the portal completely engulfed them as Bakugo grabbed nothing but particles as they both vanished into thin air. Bakugo then stopped mid-air and fell onto the ground. He then turned to see that Izuku and the man were gone. The rest of their classmates arrived as they saw Bakugo on the ground. Bakugo then slammed his fist on the ground. "Damn it!" he shouted as his scream echoed throughout the facility. Izuku slowly opened his eyes to see a black void filled with unknown stuff that floated around the space. The man then laughed as Izuku then realized that he was still in the grasp of the man's grip. Izuku then tried to wiggle his way out, but couldn't. Izuku then only had one option left. He then channeled one for all throughout his entire body as his body began to glow brightly and electricity danced around him violently. The man widened his eyes as Izuku then glared at him. 20% full cowling. Izuku then used all his strength to break the hold around him as he slid his arms in between the man's arms and forcefully separated the hold around his body. Izuku then was free from the man as the man was pushed away. Shocked by the sudden increase of power, the man tried to grab him again, but with one swipe of Izuku's right leg, he created a massive wind pressure that caused the man to fly back. While Izuku did that, he caused debris to fly around, causing holes in the small dimension. Izuku then felt the gravity pull him down as a hole was created beneath him. He then fell straight down as if he was going through a wormhole. Izuku started to panic as the gravity started to accelerate his fall. He didn't know how far the hole was or how long it was going to take. He began to see a light beneath him. He looked at the light, but only to be blinded by the brightness as he fell. He didn't get the chance to look around him to fully grasp what was going on. As the brightness started to die down a bit, he felt the wind as it pushed him up or was colliding against him. He then opened his eyes to see the clear sky. He looked around to see the bright yellow sun beside him as he stared into it. He then looked down, but only to see the ground beneath. "Wait a minute, am I falling?" Izuku muttered to himself. What a dumb question to ask, as he then felt the wind pressure staring to increase and hitting his face. "Ah!" Izuku screamed as he fell from the sky. "CRP, CRP, CRP, CRP. If I don't do something, I'm going to die." Izuku then panicked. Izuku then started to formulate a plan to ensure his survival from the height of the fall. Okay, maybe if I activate 100% and channel it through my finger, it could possibly slow down my fall when I'm close to the ground, but that's too risky. My equipment could get damaged, and I don't know where I am right now, Izuku muttered. He then continued to try and formulate his plan, but as the adrenaline kicked in, he only thought of a plan that could ensure he didn't damage himself and his gear. He then tucked his arms in and put his legs back, as if he was skydiving. That accelerated his fall even more, drawing him closer to the ground. Once he was halfway to the ground, he then expanded his arms and legs out and fired multiple Air Force smashes at the ground, causing him to slowly lose the momentum of the fall. As he was still fast approaching the ground, he then brought his right leg up, as he then used 20% of full cowling as he waited for the right moment. As he was 10 feet above the ground, he then swung his leg as strong as he could, which caused a massive pocket of air to come plummeting down on the ground as it created an explosion of dust, but caused Izuku to fly upwards as he then saw a nearby tree and grabbed onto it. But the branch was too weak to support his weight, so it snapped. Eh? Before he knew it, he came plummeting down on the ground as he then crashed on the ground, still in one piece but sore all over. "Oh," he groaned. Izuku then opened his eyes to look around. He was in a forest. He then stood up and brushed some dust off him as he then fully grasped what was around him. He couldn't tell if he was at UA or at an unknown location that's not even Japan. "Staying here won't do me any good. I need to find some kind of civilization," he said to himself. Izuku then started to walk forwards as he wandered the forest. He walked and walked, but only to find himself lost in the forest. Izuku then sighed as he just looked down hopelessly. "Where am I?" he muttered. He then took another step to keep going, but then heard a low growl. He then froze as he turned around to see a lion. No, it had horns, so it definitely wasn't a lion, but what is it? It had glaring red eyes as it slowly approached Izuku. Is this someone's quirk at work? Izuku thought. Before he could ask any questions, The beast then lunged forward as it swiped at Izuku. He then dodged and rolled to the right as the beast landed where he stood. The beast then swiftly turned to Izuku as it lunged again. Izuku then brought his hand out and activated One for All. He then launched Delaware smashes at the beast, causing the beast to flinch as it stopped mid-air. Izuku then jumped out of the way as the beast then skidded on the floor. Izuku then took a step back as he was about to dash away. But then the beast was relentless as it quickly recovered and lunged again. Izuku then moved to the side again as he then reeled his fist back as used 8% full cowling. He then collided his fist on the beast's right side of its face, causing the beast to squeal. Izuku didn't want to let up as he then jumped in the air and brought his left leg forward and then came full throttle at the beast. His feet smashed into the beast, causing the beast to fly back as it skidded across the floor. One of its horns broke off as it then laid on the floor, not moving at all. Izuku then let out a breath of relief, as Izuku then turned around to find a way out of the forest, but he then heard a snap. He swiftly turned around, but only to be met by the beast's snout as it was about to bite down on Izuku. He then brought his right hand out and grabbed the neck of the beast as it caused Izuku to fall down on the ground. Izuku was now pinned on the ground as the beast snapped its jaws at Izuku, trying to bite off his face. Izuku struggled to get the beast off as he couldn't get the beast off of him. He then tried to channel One for All, but the beast wasn't giving him time. Then Izuku's left hand then touched a hardened stone, but then he looked to see the broken piece of horn. Izuku, instinct-driven now, grabbed the horn as he then brought his left hand up and plunged the horn into the beast's neck, causing the beast to abruptly stop as it squeaked. Then BLD started to spray. Izuku appeared to hit a vital spot on the neck, causing the beast to stumble back as it laid down, the beast squirming as it squealed in agony. Izuku looked horrified as the beast then stopped as it laid lifeless on the ground, BLD flooding the floor. Izuku then looked at his left hand as his glove was splattered with BLD. Izuku then felt his vision starting to shake as his head started to PND. His vision was becoming blurring as he then started to hyperventilate. That was the first time Izuku had to kill something. Izuku then started to feel something crawl up his throat as he then turned his head to the left and released his lunch on the ground as he couldn't bear to do what he did. Izuku coughed as he couldn't comprehend what he just did. He then wiped his mouth against his sleeve as he finished hurling his lunch. Izuku then got up from where he was as he stared at the lifeless beast. Izuku solemnly looked at the dead, but he had to carry on. He needed to find a way out of this place. He continued walking as he walked endlessly, tired and hungry. He didn't even know what time it was. He then spotted a small lake as he then rushed towards it. He took off his gloves and washed his hands and so his left glove as it was covered in splatters of BLD. He then drank some water to get the breath of vomit out of his mouth. After that he finished cleaning his glove as he then waited for it to dry up. Izuku sat down as he couldn't believe what just happened. He needed to get out of this forest as quickly as possible. Izuku then got up and slipped on his glove again as it was a little moist, but still he needed to wear it just in case if that happens again. Few hours later, Izuku had walked endlessly as he couldn't find any civilization at all. Izuku grumbled as his stomach was starting to tell him to find some food. But Izuku was too exhausted right now as he couldn't rest now, not while that beast could have others like it. As Izuku kept walking, he then heard several screams. Izuku then perched up as he then traced where the shouts were. Then he looked to the left and found that the voices were coming from his left. Izuku then sprinted over as he dodged trees and bushes. Izuku then activated 8% full cowling and hopped from tree to tree. Izuku then saw a clearing up ahead that two people with a wagon. He found civilians. But why were they on a wagon? Izuku then also spotted another being. This one what looked to be a lobster-looking beast with 3 claws on it. He then noticed that the beast was about to attack those people. Izuku then sprinted full speed ahead as he then came out of the forest to see the beast about to land an attack. Izuku then swung his right leg and smashed his feet right across the beast's face, causing it to flinch, but he also noticed the beast's arm was cut off as well. Izuku then landed on the ground as he skidded away. But he also saw a boy his age behind it as well, hold a double-edged short sword. The boy had brown hair with bangs that split to both sides of his forehead. He wore a tan sleeveless sweater with a white long-sleeved shirt underneath, but also his hands were covered in brown arm guards. He wore blue jeans and brown combat boots. He noticed the beast unleashed an enraged roar. "Heh, and a class danger beast, a worthy opponent," he heard the boy. "Danger beast?" Izuku questioned, but it wasn't the time as Izuku saw the beast swing his arms towards the civilians. Izuku acted quickly as he then sped towards the two as he slammed his feet on the remaining arm of the beast and redirected his attack. The brunette boy then dashed forward and cut the beast in various places, caused the beast to bleed all over its body, but it wasn't down as it tries to slam down on the boy, but Izuku then jumped back and swiftly kicked the hand away, causing the wind to erupt around them. The boy and the two civilians covered their faces as Izuku then jumped off the beast's arms and then brought his right leg over his head and slammed down on the beast. Manchester smash. The beast that slammed on the ground, causing it to make a crater beneath it. Then the boy brought his sword and swung his last slash against the beast, finishing it. The boy then sheathed his blade as he watched Izuku then land as it caused some dust to fly up. Izuku sighed as he got up and dusted some dust off of his breath. "That was so cool what you did," the boy exclaimed. Izuku then jumped and looked at the boy. He then noticed that the boy had bright green eyes. Izuku then awkwardly smiled. Hee, it wasn't that special. Izuku rubbed his head, and the two civilians approached the two. "Thank you for saving us. We're in your debt," the first civilian spoke up. "Is there anything we can repay you?" the second offered. Then the boy grinned. "Well, if you can spread word that I, Tatsumi, am going to become the greatest in the capital." The boy now named Tatsumi had smug look as he puffed his chest out. Izuku's sweat dropped. He looked at the men that they saved, but only for them to have a cautious look. "You're going to the capital?" The man was surprised by the boy's request. The boy then nodded. "I need to make money over there in order to save my village," he responded. The second man shook his head. "I wouldn't go to the capital if I were you. There's monsters more terrifying than the one you both slayed," the man warned them. Izuku looked cautiously at the two. What are they talking about? He thought to himself. Tatsumi just shrugged it off and smiled. Even so, my village still needs help. Tatsumi hardened his resolve. The men sighed they couldn't stop the boy. Tatsumi then grabbed his bag out of nowhere. Where was that the whole time, Izuku thought? What about you, young man? What about you? Are you heading to the capital as well? You seem to be in a place from afar, judging by your outfit, one of the men asked Izuku. He then looked at the man as he nodded his head. Yeah, you could say that. I'm kinda lost right now, so the only option for me is to head to this capital you guys are talking about, Izuku replied. The man sighed as Izuku thought he was muttering something. Well, if there is anything you guys want, we can offer, but we can't take you to the capital, the man offered. As soon as he said that, Izuku's stomach started to growl as he then held his stomach. The men silently stared at the young hero. Then they busted out laughing. Young man, if you were hungry, just say so, the man laughed. Izuku felt his face heat up as he shook his head. I can't just take your food just like that. They then handed Izuku a bag of bread and some seasoning. Call it a thank you gift for saving us, the man grinned. Izuku then looked at the back, then at the men and smiled. Thank you, he accepted the offer. As Izuku slung the bag over his shoulder, Tatsumi tapped his shoulder. Since you have nowhere to go, want to head to the capital with me? Tatsumi suggested. Izuku pondered on the question. He had nowhere left to go, and finding answers of where he was the first priority. Yeah, I'll tag along, Izuku agreed. Tatsumi then smiled and nodded. Then he walked towards the direction of the capital. Izuku followed behind, but as the men watched the two headed towards the capital. "Dear men, it would have been good to have those boys in the Revolutionary, especially that green-haired boy," the man blurted. His partner nodded. "Well, we have to deliver this stuff to Night Raid," as both the men got on their carriage and dashed off towards the opposite direction. With Izuku and Tatsumi. "Oh, by the way, what's your name? I didn't catch it," Tatsumi asked. Izuku looked at him and smiled. "Oh, my name is Izuku Midoriya," he introduced himself. Izuku didn't want to use his hero name because he thought it would sound weird. "Well then, nice to meet you, Izuku," Tatsumi grinned. Izuku nodded his head. "So why are you here? Is there a reason for being at the capital?" Tatsumi asked. Izuku shook his head. "Like I said, I'm lost, so I don't really know where I'm going right now," Izuku answered. Tatsumi's eyes then lit up. "Hey, you can join the army with me and my friends," Tatsumi suggested. "Friends?" Izuku questioned. "Oh right, I traveled with 2 other people, but we got split up by bandits, so we decided to meet up here," Tatsumi explained. "Oh, must have been strong traveling alone." Izuku solemnly looked at the ground. Tatsumi shook his head. "Nah, I just trusted them to reach where we all agreed to go." Izuku smiled. "That's nice, but I don't think I'll be staying at the capital for long, so I don't think I'll be joining the army anytime soon," Izuku explained to Tatsumi. Tatsumi then slumped down. "DMN that SCK." Izuku then chuckled as they then reached a gate as they stopped in front of a pathway as they saw people entering and exiting out. They both walked through the gate to see the spectacular sight of the capital. "Whoa," Izuku muttered. But that wasn't what he was amazed about, but more surprised at how the buildings were outdated and seemed to be in a medieval era. "Seriously, where am I?" Izuku thought. Tatsumi then walked ahead. "All right, I'm going to head to the barracks. I'll see you around." He waved goodbye to Izuku as he returned the gesture. Izuku then looked around to see vendors and marketplaces that were crowded, but for some odd reason he felt slight dread in the atmosphere. Izuku couldn't ponder long as he walked around to find some information, like a library. Izuku then asked around looking for a library of sorts, but only to be led to a bookstore. He didn't have any money on him, so he'll just have to borrow it from the owner. Izuku then entered the bookstore as he walked in to see an array of books from fiction to non-fiction across the shelves. As soon as he took a step in, he was greeted by a man that had bright green hair. He wore a trench coat and welding goggles on his head. He had fingerless gloves on as well. "Hello, what can I get you today?" the man greeted. "Hey, I was wondering, do you have history books?" Izuku asked. The man then raised an eyebrow. "That's weird. Why do you need a history book?" he asked. "I'm kinda new to these parts, and I thought I could be familiar with the capital's history, you know?" Izuku answered, hoping that would not make him suspicious. But it was true, he was new around here, and he didn't know what was going on. The man then rummaged through a pile of books behind his desk. He then grabbed one book and handed it to Izuku. "Here, this is the only one I got. It'll be 3 silver, the man said. Izuku then shook his head. "Oh, I don't want to buy it. Just read it here if it's all right," Izuku asked. The man then nodded. "Yeah, sure, take your time." Izuku then grabbed the book and headed towards a quiet place to read the book as he looked over the book. The title, The History of the Glorious Empire. Izuku scanned each page with intent as he read thoroughly, but as he kept reading, he felt nothing but dread and confusion as he kept reading the book. As soon as he was done with the book, he stood there staring at a bookshelf. "This can't be happening. I can believe that I'm in another world," Izuku shouted in his head. Oh boy, what kind adventures await him in this new world? As Izuku stood in the bookstore as he reread the contents of the book. Trapped in a world where there is an empire that has been reigning over for thousands of years. And to make matters worse, the beasts he encountered were actually called danger beasts, as Tatsumi called them. But as far as going through the whole book again, Izuku knew that he landed in a different world. Izuku sighed as he closed the book and walked over to the counter as the man looked at the boy. Found everything you needed? He asked. Izuku nodded as he returned the book. Thanks again. The man grinned. Come back when you have money on you. These books aren't going to buy themselves. Izuku shook his head as he smiled and nodded. I'll keep that in mind, Izuku chuckled as he headed out of the store. He looked up at the sky as it was turning noon, as he watched the sky gradient into a red hue. Izuku then looked at the ground. He still couldn't comprehend that he was in a different world. He needed to find a way home soon. His memories then brought him back to the man that brought him here. Izuku was determined to find the man and try to find answers to his kidnapping. As his stomach growled, he then realized he hadn't eaten at all today, as he then grabbed the bag that was handed to him. He pulled out a loaf of bread. Izuku grimaced, but this was all he could eat for now until he could get home or a place to stay for the time being. As Izuku took a seat at a nearby table that wasn't occupied, he started to dig in his meal. After a few minutes of eating, he was stuffed as he smiled, his hunger fully satisfied as he stood up and proceeded to walk around the area as he needed to get familiarized with the land itself. Izuku then walked around to see less people around as nightfall was approaching. But while he wasn't looking, he bumped into someone. Caught off guard by this, he stepped back as he looked in front of him to apologize, but then realized that the person was a she. Not that it was a problem though, but what she wore was revealing. She wore a brown cloth that covered her BRST, while wearing a white scarf with what looked to be baggy white pant with a belt that had a strange stone embedded in the middle. But clearly her cleavage was basically open. Izuku's face reddened a bit as he looked away. I'm sorry. I didn't see where I was going, Izuku stuttered. He didn't look at the female as a fear of her just looking disgusted at him. He slowly turned his head towards her, but only for the woman to grin at him. He got a closer look at her as she had short yellow hair that had 2 long strands of hair going down. She had piercing yellow eyes as she looked at Izuku. Izuku widened his eyes as he shook his head, trying not to look at the woman. The woman was confused, but she put on a sly smile. Awa, what's wrong, boy? Can't handle what you see, the woman grinned. Clearly Izuku knew this woman was teasing him, but he didn't falter. Yet anyways, as he was stiff as a board. He shook his head. Is sorry, but I'll be on my way now. Izuku quickened as he sped walk past the woman as she looked at the boy as he walked away from her. Her grin then faltered into a frown as she inspected the boy, wearing unusual clothing for her at least. Strange, never seen that kind of clothing before. Oh well, she shrugged as she walked the opposite direction of where Izuku was heading. Let's use this money for something useful, like food. Akame has been eating all our food lately, she muttered. She hummed as she cheerfully walked away. Meanwhile, with Izuku. As Izuku was walking the streets, he decided to try and find a place to stay for tonight, but every inn that he tried to go into kicked him out or didn't accept him as he didn't have money. All Izuku had on him was a bag of leftover bread just in case he'd ever grow hungry. The sun was slowly vanishing in the sky as the moon was finally appearing. Izuku then looked at the sky as he sighed. He's going to have to sleep on the ground, isn't he? Today was eventful, as Izuku replayed what conspired today. Being kidnapped by an unknown man, then getting sent to another world where he had no knowledge of, struggling in money, and now he'd have to sleep on the streets and hopefully not get mugged or worse. Hopefully tomorrow he can try to get a grasp of this world. Izuku then continued to walk as he then walked by an alley, but only to hear a scream. Izuku perked his head up as he shifted his gaze quickly into the alley. Someone needed help. That was all going through Izuku's head right now. But he didn't want anyone to see his face, so he pulled his hoodie mask over his head and covered his face with the mask that came with his suit. He then sprinted into the alley. As he ran further into the alley, he could hear some struggling and laughing. As he then spotted 3 figures ahead as he activated 8% full cowling. As he got closer, there was a woman being cornered by 2 men. The men were armed with knives. Izuku watched as they were about to cut the piece of her ragged cloth that was covering her bust. Izuku swiftly bounced off the walls as he then quickly approached the three. The man that was about to cut her cloth turned, but only to see Izuku's iron soles collide with his face as he then felt a heavy weight pushing him as he flew past his buddy. "What the?" His buddy flabbergasted, but didn't have time to react as Izuku then went back on the wall and bounced towards him, putting his right knee forward and bam, collided his knee into the other man's nose as he drove him into the wall, making a crack on the wall. Izuku landed as he then turned towards the person he sent flying as he slowly got up. This was his chance as he grabbed the woman and carried her away from the assailants. Izuku could hear some shouting as he quickly ran out of the alley with the woman and ran as far away from the location. As Izuku checked to see if they were in a safe spot, he put the woman down. He breathed for air as he took a deep breath. He then looked at the woman as he then brought his hand out. "You're safe now, everything." Izuku couldn't finish his sentence as the woman took a step back as he was confused. He looked at the woman's eyes, only to see fear and distrust in her eyes. She then ran away from him. "Wait," Izuku cried, but it was too late as she was already gone. Izuku took off his hood mask and the mouth guard. What was that about? Why was she so afraid? He questioned. He didn't understand why she was so afraid. He just saved her, so why? He couldn't linger on it, as long as she was safe. That's all that matters in the end. Izuku then continued to walk in the streets to search for a place to sleep. He sighed. He needed to get out of here. After he went on his way, he encountered people in trouble as he tried to help as many of them as he could without revealing his face. Izuku rescued people from harm, but in the end they all ran away after he helped them almost as if they didn't trust him at all, which he understood, but if they could at least smile when he helped. That would have made him glad, but no one smiled when he saved them. What is up with people being so afraid or distrustful? He muttered. He walked down the streets as he looked down. Saving people, but in the end none of them smiled or were relieved. Izuku wondered what was going on in this capital. Why are people so afraid? Why don't these people smile? Izuku thought about it in his head, but in the end, he couldn't find an answer as one main goal was constantly appearing in his head, getting back home. He shook his head as he continued down the street as nightfall was in motion. But little did he know, someone was watching him from afar. Few hours later. Izuku has been walking for a while and still no progress on finding shelter as he sighed. This couldn't get any worse, can it? Izuku then didn't know where he was going as he then tripped on something. Hey, watch where you're Izuku shook his head as he turned towards the voice. Izuku? Izuku then turned as he saw a familiar brunette. Tatsumi? They both stared at each other as they wondered why they were there. What are you doing here? I thought you joined the army, Izuku questioned. Tatsumi then sweat dropped. Yeah, about that. Izuku then quirked his brow up as he looked at the brunette. I kinda maybe got cocky and told them to move me up to a higher rank, so they didn't accept my application, Tatsumi explained. Izuku didn't believe what he heard as he sighed. He sat down next to Tatsumi. You know cockiness can only get you so far, right? Izuku told the brunette. Tatsumi then scratched his head. Yeah, I'm starting to feel that now. Izuku chuckled. Tatsumi then looked at the brunette. So why are you here? He asked. Izuku looked at him. I have no money, so inns won't let me stay. Tatsumi nodded. Well, at least I'm not the only one, he chuckled. Izuku just sighed. Man, how am I going to get home? Tatsumi looked at him. Oh, right, you're lost when we first met. Did you find anything you needed? Izuku shook his head. No, let's just say I'm really far from home. Tatsumi nodded before he could say anything. The duo heard clumping as horses were coming this way. They looked into the direction to see a carriage. As it slowly approached them, they both stared at it. It then stopped in front of them. Miss Aria, not again, a voice spoke up. I can't help it. It's my nature. The door to the carriage opened to reveal a blonde girl. Her hair was short, almost touching her shoulder. She wore a blue dress with a ribbon. She smiled at the two. Looks like you two could use some place to stay, she smiled. Tatsumi seemed to have a poker face as he was kinda distrustful for some reason. Izuku just stared at her. She seemed to be noble, so why did she want some random strangers to stay over? Izuku was questioning the girl's offer. Miss Aria can't ignore people like you two. It's best to accept the offer since you have no place to stay, the guard that was with her stated. Tatsumi thought about it as he turned to Izuku. He responded by shrugging as he really didn't have an option anyways. Tatsumi turned back to the guards. Yeah, I guess we'll take you up on that offer, he agreed. Aria smiled as she jumped. Great, hop in, we'll show you to my house, she gleed. Tatsumi grabbed his stuff and headed inside the carriage. So did Izuku as they both walked in and sat down. Aria right across from them. The guards beside her as they kept watch on the two, to make sure they didn't try anything. It was quiet, really quiet, as you could hear the carriage rattling as it rolled on the streets. Izuku decided to break the silence by asking the young girl a question. So, Aria right? Do you often take strangers to your house? Izuku asked. Aria smiled. All the time, I can't help but help those in need. Izuku nodded as he fully understood that he was willing to do anything to help anyone he can. Tatsumi then looked at Izuku as he was glad that he broke the silence. You guys are really generous for taking in a bunch of country bumpkins in, Tatsumi jumped in. She smiled at Tatsumi. Well, my family and I tend to treat our guests that just arrived here with a warm welcome. Izuku was curious though, after he helped the lady that was about to get defiled. She looked at him with fear, as if he would do something to her. Yet this girl right here was offering them a place to stay. Maybe it was the guards with her that made her feel safe out on the streets. This place is really weird, Izuku thought to himself. Miss Aria, we have arrived, the driver announced. On Quain, the guards opened the doors and held it open for the three to step out of the carriage. As Tatsumi and Izuku took a step out, they were in front of a high-class mansion as the gates were fully open, revealing the front of the manor. Tatsumi hung his mouth open as Izuku just stared at it with wide eyes. I didn't know she was rich, Tatsumi exclaimed. Izuku then realized that they were in a fancy carriage, so that could explain her wealth. Come in, you two. I'll introduce you to my parents, Aria gestured. The two followed her inside of the mansion. As they stepped in, it was arrayed with lights and antiques aligned on the walls. Aria was leading them to a living room as they saw two people sitting on the couches. One was a blonde woman that wore a similar kind of dress as Aria, and another was a man that was plump and had gray hair with a mustache. The two adults looked at the three as they sighed. Again, Aria, the man sighed. She laughed it off. Father, you know me. I can't help it. The man shook his head as the woman placed her hand on her cheek. As expected, but I didn't know you were bringing two fine young men here, the woman giggled. Aria seemed to blush. Mom. The woman laughed it off. The man then looked at the two. Sorry about my daughter. You two are welcome to stay as you like. Izuku was about to say something, but Tatsumi interjected. Sorry, but I don't think we'll be staying for a while, he stated. The man raised a brow. Why is that, young man? Well, I need to enlist into the army to make money for my village, and also I came here with other friends that I need to look for, but thank you for your hospitality, Tatsumi explained. The man nodded. Ah, I see. A noble ideal. It's a shame that you won't be staying for a while, but I can contact a friend to get you into the service, the man offered. Tatsumi lit up. Really? Thank you. The man raised his hand. Not at all. Think nothing of it. As he said that, he then turned to Izuku. What about you? What is your reason of arriving in the capital? Izuku looked at the man. Oh, well, I guess you could say I was looking for an answer. I arrived here without any knowledge of this place, so I wanted to get accustomed to where I'm at, Izuku explained his story. The man nodded. Did you come alone? Surely you came with someone. As soon as the man said that, Izuku widened his eyes, then looked at the floor, remembering his classmates as they watched him disappear right in front of them. "No, I came alone," he answered. The woman frowned. "Oh, you poor child." Izuku shook his head. "I'm sure I'll find a way home soon." The man smiled. "That's some determination, young man. Well, it is getting late. Guards, show them to their room," he ordered. The two that accompanied them took a step forward as they gestured the two to follow them. As the four walked in the halls, they arrived at a door as the guards opened it to reveal two beds on each side of the room. In the middle was a cabinet with a lamp on top. "These will be your room for the time being. And also Miss Aria would like you two to accompany her tomorrow in the morning," the guard relayed. Tatsumi and Izuku nodded as the guards closed the door and left. Tatsumi then jumped on the bed and laid there as he let out a huge breath of relief. "Finally, a nice bed to sleep on," he sighed. Izuku chuckled as he sat at the other bed. "Man, a lot has happened, huh? You trying to find a way home, me getting kicked out of the enlisting office and me getting scammed," Tatsumi groaned the last part. Izuku then perked up. "You got scammed?" Tatsumi then chuckled. "Yep, but that's what I get for trusting a stranger." Izuku then raised a brow. "But we're trusting a stranger who happens to be a noble." Tatsumi then choked as he lifted himself and pointed at Izuku. "Okay, I get it, smart butt," he shouted. Izuku laughed as Tatsumi joined in as well. "Man, I wish Ieyasu and Seo could meet you. I bet they'll like you," Tatsumi pointed out. Izuku smiled. "Yeah, I guess I won't be alone in this place." Tatsumi smiled. "Well, that's if I get into the army, of course." Tatsumi then yawned as he stretched. "Welp, I guess we should call it a night. We got to go with Aria to the capital." Izuku nodded as he reached for the lamp and turned it off. "Good night, Tatsumi." "Night, Izuku." The both of them then laid on the bed as Tatsumi was fast asleep, but Izuku, however, was still thinking about how he was going to get back home to his classmates. Not only that, he needed to get home because of the impending threat of the League of Villains. He thought of many ways. One was finding the person who kidnapped him. He thought of others as well, but he also thought about the flaws of those ideas. Izuku thought long and strong, but he couldn't get any answers as his eyes started to feel heavy as he then drifted into a slumber. Next morning. "So, I know we agreed to go take a walk with Aria, but does she really need to buy all of this?" Tatsumi questioned as he looked at the fully loaded wagon filled with clothing and presents as if it was almost a skyscraper, sort of. Izuku placed a box on the wagon as he remembered Yaoyorozu handed Ishido her black card and the pink girl went off as Kirishima and Kaminari hand to drag a wagon of clothing and accessories. Izuku just shook his head as remembering the faces Kirishima and Kaminari had. "Well, it's what most girls do," the guard stated. Izuku completely agreed as he remembered the pink alien girl. "Really? I have one friend that just wears whatever she has," Tatsumi blurted out. Izuku then sweat dropped remembering Uraraka. "That's probably because she has nothing else to wear," Izuku muttered. Tatsumi sighed as he then looked somewhere else. Izuku followed his gaze as they stopped at the top of the city, where it looked to be the palace of the capital Izuku assumed. "So that's the palace, where the emperor makes the choices," Tatsumi awed. The guard then jumped a bit as he then walked towards Izuku and Tatsumi. "Yeah, about that. The emperor doesn't really rule this empire," the guard informed. The two looked at him with confusion. "What do you mean?" Izuku asked. The guard then leaned in closer in whispering range. "The emperor is only a child." Izuku and Tatsumi widened their eyes at the news. "And it is completely overruled by the prime minister," the guard finished. "Prime Min," Tatsumi couldn't finish as the guard quickly slapped his hand over his mouth. "SHH, don't say it loud or they'll have our heads," the guard warned. Tatsumi nodded as he then looked down. "So that's why my village has been hit with overpriced taxes," he clenched his fist as Izuku felt the tension in the air. And also we have to deal with these guys as well. The guard then pointed to a few wanted posters as Izuku and Tatsumi looked where he was pointing. The wanted posters read Night Raid. Izuku widened his eyes as those words were familiar, as it was one of the voices that flooded his mind. Night Raid? Tatsumi asked. A bunch of assassins that hunt nobles or important figures at night per the name, the guard stated. Assassins? Izuku thought. As he then looked at one of the posters, Akame, he looked at the image as if it was a girl that seemed to have black hair. We already have enough to deal with, the guard groaned. He then looked at the two again. Just make sure you two stay vigilant. Tatsumi smiled. Right. Then the guard looked up as he frowned. Also, you might want to deal with that. Izuku and Tatsumi then turned to see two guards struggling to carry a large present box that was completely towering over them. What do you want us to do with that? Tatsumi exclaimed. Izuku's sweat dropped as he watched Aria just frolicking away happily. That night, after Izuku and Tatsumi helped the guards with the massive present box, well, mostly Izuku as he just used one for all to carry the thing. The guards and Tatsumi were astonished by Izuku's strength. Once they returned, Tatsumi and Izuku decided to head to bed early as they decided to leave first thing in the morning. But later that evening, while everyone was asleep, the mother was walking in the halls holding a book. I have so much writing in my diary, he, what a fun little hobby. The woman giggled. But before she knew it, she then felt she was up in the air, but couldn't feel her legs and arm as her midriff of her body was cut in half as her legs stayed on the ground, but her other half was up in the air. The BLD poured out as she didn't have enough time to process what happened. She was dead before she knew it. A girl with long purple hair that reached the midriff of her back. She wore a violet chingsan. She also carried a giant scissor that was now stained with fresh BLD. She then bowed, I'm sorry. Izuku and Tatsumi abruptly woke up as they felt a sudden cold as they both looked at each other. You felt that too? Tatsumi asked. Izuku nodded. They both got off of their respective beds and reached for their gears. Tatsumi slipped on his brown arm guards and black gloves, while Izuku attached his leg braces and iron sole. He then moved to his arm braces and Air Force gloves as he then locked them in. Tatsumi strapped his blade behind him. They then burst out of their room as they rushed down the halls, but in the corner of Izuku's eyes, he saw 5 shadows casted as he looked out of the window as Tatsumi stopped and looked out as well. They saw 5 people standing on thin strings that somehow held their weight, facing away from the BLD moon that illuminated in the dark sky. One was clad with gray armor that had a white cape behind him. He held a spear that was red on the blade. The next one was a girl that wore a pink dress that matched her hair as she seemed to have something attached to her face that looked to be a scanner. She held a large rifle that seemed way too complicated to be a normal rifle. The other was to Izuku's surprise, the same man that he saw at the bookstore, but this time he wore a brown trench coat and his gloves seemed to have string attached at the ends of his fingers. The other one was a woman that had long wavy yellow hair, and she had cat-like features, but for some reason her clothing seemed familiar. The final one was a girl with long deep black hair that seemed to reach down to her knees. She wore a black trench coat, but underneath seemed to be a red skirt with a black dress shirt that had a white collar. She held a katana that seemed to have an inscription on the handle. Tatsumi knew what was going on as he saw the black-haired girl. Izuku looked at the 5 as he knew what they were here for, to assassinate this family. At night, the killers in the dark. The assassins of Night Raid. Izuku and Tatsumi stared at the 5 as they stood over the manor. Izuku then looked down to see the guards rushing out to deal with them. Hey, should we help them? Tatsumi asked. Izuku didn't know what to do because he didn't know what these guys were capable of. Meanwhile, outside with Night Raid, the 5 stared down at the guards. The bright greenette spotted the guards and turned towards the black-haired girl. Hey, Akame, those guys are our targets, he explained. She then looked down. "Eliminate," was all she could say as she dropped down along with the man clad in armor as the dust dispersed as they landed. The guards stood ready as they watched the two walk towards them. Akame then unsheathed her blade. The guard then recognized the sword. "Watch out, don't let that sword touch you," he warned his comrades. He then charged forward. "Let's go." But before he even could get one swing in, Akame swiftly flew past him. But as she flew past, she cut his neck, making a small slit on his neck. He then coughed up BLD as he stared down at his neck. "This is what I deserve. The capital has corrupted me," he groaned as he then laid lifeless on the ground. The other guard tried to attack Akame, but the armor-clad threw his spear at him, impaling and sending him flying back. The last guard shook in fear as he then ran away. "Who are these monsters?" he cried. But he couldn't get far as a bullet penetrated his skull. The pink-haired girl's rifle was now smoking as she looked rather disappointed. Izuku and Tatsumi widened their eyes as they witnessed a complete overwhelming power of the group of assassins. Izuku then hardened his nerves as he then turned to Tatsumi. "Tatsumi, go find Aria. They might target her. I'll go look for others," Izuku ordered. Snapping out of the trance, Tatsumi nodded as he rushed off. Izuku then heads in the opposite direction. As he rushed through the halls, he could hear struggling on the first floor. He needed to get there fast. He then activated one for all 8% full cowling as he zoomed down the hall. Akame was then finishing off some guards as the corner of her eyes spotted a flash of green light on the second floor of the building. She looked up to see what was going on. She then felt a tap on her shoulder. "Akame, go get the target. We'll take it from here," the armor-clad reassured her. She nodded as she went off to find her target. Izuku ran into rooms, trying to find people he could SCRT out of the building, but he found no one. He couldn't lose hope, though, as he rushed further down. He then spotted a figure on the ground as he then stopped abruptly. He knew two things. One, that figure was dead already, and he was too late. Or two, they're knocked unconscious, and he still has a chance to save them. Izuku gulped as he slowly approached the figure as the light started to reveal the mother of the household, but into two pieces as she laid lifeless. Izuku widened his eyes as he then held his mouth at the sight. Izuku shut his eyes as he didn't want to look at it any further. He then lifted one eye open as he then saw a diary on the ground next to the woman's arms. Izuku then reached down to look at it. As he grabbed it, he then turned around as he then opened the diary. He skimmed through the diary, hoping to find some things that could help, like valuables that they kept. But reading the diary, all Izuku could find was a list of people's names. "What is this? They each have some sort of description beneath each name. Why?" Izuku muttered. He then flipped through the pages until he found two names he was quite familiar with. He widened his eyes and then started to read the description. "Seo, a girl with appealing black hair. My daughter was very jealous of her. Too bad. I wanted to play with her as well, but she killed her before I could get the chance. Oh well, doesn't matter. There are more playthings to enjoy. Iyasu, the boy has shown quite the resilience, but at last, he could only hold for so long. He will probably die today. The poison I injected into him is probably on its last stage. My God, is it fun to inject Ebola virus into them." Izuku stared at the diary in horror as his whole body froze. "They did all that? To his friends?" he uttered as he couldn't fathom the horrific things they did. Izuku then realized that Tatsumi and him were probably next. He dropped the diary on the floor and used 8% full cowl and dashed down the halls. "I need to warn Tatsumi. If something bad happens, he'll die. Not just tonight raid, but to the girl he's protecting," Izuku muttered. Meanwhile, with Tatsumi. As Tatsumi stood there with his sword in his hand and Aria behind him, he stared down at the black-haired girl as she stood there. "You are not a target. You don't have to die," she warned him. Tatsumi pointed his sword at her. "Yeah, well, I can't just let you kill an innocent little girl," he shouted. "Mimechem," she hummed. "Mimechem?" Tatsumi repeated in question. She then brought her blade in front as the moon reflected the blade's shine. "If you won't get out of the way, then you'll be eliminated," she stared down at him. Tatsumi shivered a bit at the killing intent as he knew he was no match for her. Tatsumi then looked back at Aria as she was frightened. He gritted his teeth and turned back. "What am I doing? If you can't save a helpless little girl, then how can you possibly save an entire village?" He then shoved the fear down and stared at his opponent with determination. While out of the action stood a yellow lioness, watching as the scene played out. "God, does that boy have bad luck," she muttered as she recognized the boy. As the wind blew and tension rose in the air as the two swordsmen stared at each other, waiting for the other to make a move. Tatsumi then dashed at her as she also did the same to him. As they ran at each other, they both clashed their weapons against each other. The ring of swords colliding echoed. They held it there for a second, then Tatsumi pushed her blade away as he did a sideways slash, but she anticipated this and jumped up as she flipped and kicked him on the hip, causing Tatsumi to lose his balance and pushed back. "Damn it," he shouted. He then tried to recover as he then faced her, but only to be stabbed in the chest by her blade. He widened his eyes with shock as he coughed. The assassin then pulled her blade out as she retreated back, while Tatsumi fell down on the floor lifeless. Even though Tatsumi was down, the assassin did not even bat an eye as she stayed focused on him. Tatsumi then laughed as he then slowly got up. "Diamen, I thought I could get you off guard," Tatsumi smirked. "It felt like I hit a sort of armor," she stated. Tatsumi then reached into his shirt and pulled out an idol as he showed it to the assassin. "I guess the old man was right about me keeping it with me." The lioness watched in amazement as she was quite impressed with the luck that boy possesses. But that didn't stop AceAkuma as she then brought her blade up. "Eliminate," she firmly spoke as she dashed towards him. Tatsumi then panicked. Wait. There's no reason for you to kill this girl, right? You're just here for the money, right? There's no need to kill an innocent." Tatsumi's luck ran out as she wasn't listening to him at all. CRP. She isn't listening. He then watched as she was already upon him, about to decapitate him. The lioness was about to stop her, but then she heard a faint wind howl as she turned around, but only to see a flash of green lightning dash by her with incredible speed, as the wind blew against her as she ran to shield her eyes against the dust. The assassin then noticed a noise coming from behind as she stopped and turned, but only to be met with a boy with dark green hair that was flashing electricity around him. The lioness and the assassin were surprised about the sudden arrival of this random boy, but all the assassin could register was getting kicked on the side as she was sent back to a tree, as she heard one word: "Smash." Izuku then stood before them as he was glowing with green lightning particles dancing around him. Tatsumi never felt more relieved to see the greenette. "Izuku, thank God you're he." "Tatsumi, there's no time. I need to tell you something," Izuku interrupted him quickly as if it was urgent. But before he could utter any words, the assassin dashed out of the tree she was kicked to and brought her sword into a stabbing position as she was about to rail it into his abdomen. But Izuku's quick thinking used 20% full cowl and slammed his right foot down on the ground, causing the ground beneath them to shatter, but he also made a stone wall, making the girl stop in her tracks. The assassin, however, didn't stop as she then jumped up and was now above the young hero as Izuku then brought his hand up to fire off Delaware's smashes at her. As they were about a few feet away from each other, a lioness interrupted them as she grabbed the assassin in the air and landed a few feet away from the three. "What are you doing, Leon?" asked the assassin as she made a poker face. "We'll still have time, AceAkuma, and I think I owe the guy a favor," the girl now named Leon responded. Izuku stood there until he suddenly recognized the woman as she was the one that Izuku bumped into. Izuku was about to speak up, but then, "Hey, you're the girl with the melons," Tatsumi shouted angrily at the lioness. Izuku turned his head as he had a questioning look. Tatsumi noticed this and just awkwardly smiled and shrugged. "That's right, big sis is here," she waved at them. Izuku then realized that he needed to tell Tatsumi about the family. "Tatsumi!" Izuku shouted. "What, I didn't know what to say, Oka." "Come to the shed with me quick," Izuku ordered. Leon and Akame raised their brows, but mostly Leon was surprised. Did this boy find out about the family, she thought. Izuku then ran towards the shed, as Aria flinched as Izuku brought his right leg up and used 20% and kicked down the door with brute force. Izuku then landed as he looked inside and widened his eyes in horror at what he was witnessing right now. Tatsumi followed behind as he then caught up to Izuku. "Hey man, you can't just kick down, what the hell?" he uttered in horror. The two stared into the shed as they witnessed hanging bodies, men and women alike, as their bodies were mutilated, but also some were in torture contraptions as they laid lifeless. Some were in cages as if they were desperately crying for help. "What is this?" Tatsumi uttered. "This is the true nature of the family. They lure countryside people with sweet talk, then drug them and torture them." Leon walked up to the two with Akame following behind. Aria tried to sneak away, but Leon caught the action and grabbed her head. "And where do you think you're going?" she hissed. "They did all of this?" Tatsumi asked. Leon and Aria looked at the brunette. "That's right." "No, it's not. Who would you believe, Tatsumi? The people that saved you, or a bunch of murders?" Aria rejected. Tatsumi turned to Izuku, but he was already gone as he looked forward, only to see Izuku bring down a body. Tatsumi looked at him with confusion until he noticed a familiar black-hair girl that Izuku was carrying. "Seo?" Tatsumi gasped. He walked toward Izuku. Tatsumi then carried the body as he then started to tremble as he held his friend's lifeless body. Tatsumi looked up to Izuku as he only saw sadness in the hero's eyes, but also frustration. He saw Izuku tighten his fists, but he couldn't see his eyes as his hair was covering it. "Is that your friend?" Leon asked. Tatsumi only nodded as he tried to hold in the tears. "Tatsumi?" a voice called out. Tatsumi widened his eyes in horror as he turned his head to the left to see another friend, but he could see he was bruised and beaten. He was entrapped in a tiny cage where he had to kneel in order to fit in. "Iyasu?" he looked in horror. Izuku widened his eyes as he knew the condition he was in. Izuku activated 8% full cowling and dashed towards the cage and broke down the bars. Iyasu almost fell to the floor, but Izuku caught him. Iyasu looked at the greenette. Izuku couldn't look at him. He just couldn't, knowing the poison inside his body. "That girl, she brought us in, then drugged us. When we came to, we were here. Then she tortured Seo to death," he shouted but coughed. Izuku laid him down. Izuku looked around to see if there was any hope at all or anything. Just to save him, there had to be, right? A way to save him, to prevent his death, right? Izuku shook as he gritted his teeth as he could do nothing right now to save him. "Fine, I did it." Arua slapped Leon's hand away as she took a step back. "So what? All of you are just vermin, cattle. You're nothing but livestock, only my playthings for my enjoyment. But that girl, she had such smooth, appealing hair. Mine was always giving me trouble, so I treated her extra special." Aria ranting as the innocent look completely vanished and replaced it with a crazed, psychotic look. Izuku looked at her with horror as the girl took a complete 180. He could feel Iyasu's hand clench as he heard the girl rant. "God, look at her. Sorry for stopping you early." Leon looked at the blonde girl with disgust. "Eliminate." Akame prepped her blade as she was about to cut her down. "Wait!" Tatsumi then stopped the assassins. Leon looked surprised. "Really? You're going to keep defending her?" "No." Tatsumi's voice was dark and low. Izuku widened his eyes as he turned around. "Wait, Tatsumi. Don't." But it was too late as Tatsumi cut her down as she gasped as her BLD spilled on the grass. Izuku looked at Tatsumi as a vision appeared in his head as he clenched his head. He could see his vision glitch. As his vision glitched, he could see Tatsumi walking down a dark path filled with BLD. Then fragments of visions started to interlap, seeing images that related to Tatsumi. Then he saw Tatsumi leaning against a giant robot behind, as he was covered in BLD. Izuku didn't understand what it was, but for some reason, he felt like he witnessed Tatsumi's death in the vision he saw. Izuku widened his eyes as he gasped. His breath was shaky now as he felt his vision blur, but he recovered as he felt a hand on his arm. He turned to see the dying boy look at him with desperation. "Hey, Dumi, a favor, please watch over Tatsumi. For us, please," he uttered. Izuku looked at the boy. At first, all Izuku wanted was to find a way home and return to his life as a hero in training, but now he's holding a dying boy who he couldn't save. Please, Tatsumi needs someone. He needs a shoulder to lean on. Hack, hack, hack. He coughed up BLD. Izuku gritted his teeth as he shut his eyes, and tears started to stream down. Izuku stared at his hands as it was shaking. He then clenched it as he stopped his tears from streaming down. "I will," Izuku responded firmly. Ieyasu smiled as he saw a glimmer of light, as if a hero was in front of him. He couldn't be happier. You know, Seo never really gave in to that beach. So just like her, he stared at the ceiling reaching up. Tatsumi noticed this and rushed towards the two. "I'd like to go out." With a bang, Ieyasu uttered his final words. "Ieyasu!" Tatsumi shouted. Iyasu's eyes became dull as all the light drained away. His hand then fell limp as now Izuku held a lifeless body of Tatsumi's friend. Tatsumi widened his eyes. "Ieyasu!" he cried for his friend. Izuku let Tatsumi mourn as he stood up and held his arm, clenching as strong as he could. "Young Midoriya, though I am the symbol of peace, I can't save everyone. That's just how life is. That's why I save as many as I can, to inspire them to become heroes themselves and save others just like you, young man. So please keep fighting." Izuku remembered the words that All Might spoke to him. He knew he couldn't save everyone, but why? The person was right there in front of him. So why? Why couldn't he save him? Damn it. Leon and Akame stared at the two as they mourned the dead. Akame solemnly looked at the two. She knew what it felt like losing friends. She knew it all too well. She looked at the Izuku as she saw frustration and sadness as he clenched his fists together. She then winced as there was a bruise on her right as she got it from his attack, sending her to a tree. She looked at the boys as she wondered what kind of tegu he used to produce that kind of power. She noticed how the boy sent her flying into a tree and how quickly appeared in the fight. She then turned around as she was about to walk away. "Come on, Leon, we're done here," she stated. "Wait," Leon stopped her. She turned her head slightly. Leon pointed her thumb towards the two. "Why don't we bring these two with us?" Leon suggested. Akame then turned around fully as she looked at her friend. Izuku relaxed his hands as it started to hurt from the pressure he was putting on his hands and the countless times he activated One for All. His body should be screaming right now, but it would seem that his body is used to 20%, but going further will only hurt him. Izuku turned his head towards Tatsumi as he tried to place his hand on his shoulder, but was then abruptly grabbed by the hood of his hero suit and dragged. Izuku widened his eyes as he also heard Tatsumi struggling. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Tatsumi squirmed around. Izuku looked back to see the lioness known as Leon dragging them, with Akame walking ahead. "I mean, this boy has extreme luck and talent. It would be a waste to have him stay here, and Greenie has tegu. What are the odds?" Leon was talking to Akame. Izuku raised a brow. "A tegu? What is that?" he thought. "Hey, I need to bury my friends, damn it," Tatsumi exclaimed. Don't worry, I'll bring them to our base, so don't worry," Leon reassured. Izuku then looked at the black-haired assassin as she was staring at him. Izuku shivered a bit but got a closer look at her. Deep, smooth black hair that reached down to her knees, a black trench coat with red arm guards and black gloves that came with the guards. She also wore brown shoes with black high-knee socks. But that wasn't all. She was deadbeat appealing. Izuku didn't really notice any girl features because, well, he rarely bothered trying. Uraraka was a precious friend, but he never looked at her that way. But when he looked at Akame, she was just strikingly appealing. But what got Izuku the most was her eyes, her deep crimson red eyes. Izuku deeply blushed as Akame continued looking at the hero. Akame, on the other hand, was curious about what the boy was wearing and what his tegu was. Was it the gloves, the iron soles on his feet, or was it the suit itself? Akame gazed at the boy as she noticed his diamond-shaped freckles and his dark green hair that was messy, but she also looked at his emerald eyes, eyes so full of hope and determination, not an ounce of rage or despair. Izuku looked away as he realized that he'd been staring too long. But then he felt his body lift up as Leon shrugged Tatsumi and Izuku over shoulders and jumped. As Leon and Akame jumped from tree to tree as they approached a building and climbed up the building. As they arrived, they noticed 4 people in front of them. The same people that were standing on the strings except the girl with purple hair. Tatsumi and Izuku were dropped down as they collided against the roof. "Oof!" they grunted. Izuku then looked at the 6 people, but an image clouded his vision again as they all were covered in BLD. Each of them was still smiling as the vision showed each one of them dead. He shook his head as there was a sharp pain coming from his head. "Finally, what took you guys? What are those?" the pink-haired girl asked. "Oh, these guys? Our new members," Leon answered. "What?" Tatsumi exclaimed. Izuku would say something, but the pain in his head was starting to pulsate as if his brain was getting stabbed by needles. "Oh yeah, forgot to tell you. We are Night Raid," Leon introduced the 2 to the band of assassins. "Yeah, we know that, but don't we get a say in this?" Tatsumi interjected. "Give it up. Leon never gives up when she wants something badly," Akame answered. Leon patted Akame's head. "My friend knows me too well." Akame then turned her gaze at Izuku, but only for him to be holding his head as he struggled to stand up. Izuku, on the other hand, was having the worst migraine on earth as he felt his head splitting. He then looked at the band of assassins, but everyone was blurry. "Come on, Izuku, say some. Izuku, you okay?" Tatsumi asked as he looked at the hero, as if he wasn't paying attention at all. Izuku then took a step, but then he blacked out instantly as his body started to fall. Tatsumi widened his eyes as he tried to catch him, but Akame appeared in front of Izuku and caught him, preventing him from falling. "What the? I swear the kid was fine just a minute ago," Leon stated. The bright green-haired boy looked at Izuku as he then pointed at him. "Huh? That's the guy who came into my store," the man pointed out. Leon looked at the green head, but ignored him. "He's probably exhausted after using his tegu," Leon guessed. "Wait, he has a tegu?" The pink-haired girl looked at Leon. She nodded in response as she grinned. "Yep, strength tegu, but I don't know what it is though." Akame held the boy as she felt his body, more muscular than she thought. "Bulat, carry him for me," Akame ordered. "Got it." The man clad with armor lifted Izuku over his shoulders. "While you're at Bulat Sichai, carry him as well," Leon pointed at Tatsumi. Before Tatsumi could reject, it was too late as he was lifted off the ground and was carried like a bag. "Let me go," Tatsumi struggled. "Awa, a feisty one." "Don't worry, it'll all be over soon," the cladded armor slurred. Tatsumi gulped. "What?" "Mission complete, we're heading home," Akame informed as she jumped off the building. The rest followed after her as the cladded armor was now named Bulat was the last. "What hell is happening right now?" Tatsumi screamed as they faded into the dead of night. With Izuku. Izuku then woke up in the dark void again as he sat up as he looked around. His mouth and body were covered in haze as he could only see and hear. Ninth. A voice called to him as he then looked behind as he saw the first once again. Izuku tried to talk to him, but since his mouth was covered in haze, he couldn't. There were so many questions that he wanted to ask, but the first shook his head. "I do not know why this is happening, Ninth. but in your heart. You know the right path. Take that path, it is your choice, the first spoke to Izuku. Izuku, however, was confused and lost. He didn't know why he had these visions and why he was sent here. No, he was kidnapped and forced here, but why? Izuku wanted to scream, shout, maybe even cry, but he just couldn't. The promise he made to Ieyasu as he died in his arms, he needed to help Tatsumi. Izuku stood there in the void as a light was then revealed in front of him. He looked towards the light as it was blinding him. Izuku's eyes then fluttered open as a ray of light was blinding him. His vision then caught sight of the ceiling. Izuku then turned his head as he saw a drawer and a closet next to him, but on the drawer was all of his gear. His arm bracers, gloves, leg braces, and his iron soles. Izuku was still in his hero suit as he slowly lifted himself up as he then looked at his right hand, his scarred hand that was due to overuse of One for All. Izuku then got off the bed as he walked towards the window to see the forest and the sun up in the sky. He looked from both sides and up. "Where am I?" Izuku muttered. "Our base," a voice all too familiar called out behind him. Izuku turned around to see the yellow-haired woman, but this time her hair was not long and wavy, but short with two strands that were long. Leone, as he remembered her to be called that. "Gotta say, I was wondering when you were going to wake, or I had to wake you up myself," she slurred, giving him a flirtatious smile. Izuku shivered slightly and blushed as he stood still. Leone noticed this and laughed. "I'm just kidding. Come on, I'll show you around the base with Tatsumi." She then exited the room. Izuku quickly put on his red shoes, which were neatly placed next to the bed he slept on. He then followed behind Leone as they went to get Tatsumi. As they walked down the hall, Leone was glancing at the greenette. "What?" Izuku noticed this. Leone turned her head. "I was just wondering, where do you come from?" she asked. Izuku flinched as he didn't really know how to answer the question since he's in another world. I'm from another country," Izuku answered. "Yeah, I know, but what's the name of the country?" Leone continued to question. Izuku was now trying to find a way to answer that question without him exposing his otherworldly identity. It's called Japan," he answered. "Hopefully she takes it." Leone then raised a brow. Never heard of it. So why are you here of all places?" "I was kidnapped here, so I don't know anything about the Empire," Izuku answered. Well, it wasn't a complete lie, as he did get kidnapped to an unknown land world. "Kidnapped? Diamen that's got to SCK, huh?" Leone stated. Izuku nodded as he was still trying to find a way home. Leone and Izuku then walked outside and then turned to the left to see Tatsumi sitting between what Izuku assumed to be gravestones. Izuku tried to call out to Tatsumi, but Leone placed her hand over his mouth and silently shushed him as she held a finger. She then walked towards Tatsumi as she then placed her chest on top of his head, which caused Tatsumi to snap out of it and backed away from Leone. "What the hell are you doing?" he exclaimed. Leone waved as she grinned. "Ah, come on, did you think about the offer?" Tatsumi was then about to answer her, but he saw Izuku. "Izuku, you're awake, thank God," Tatsumi sighed in relief. Izuku smiled. "Sorry for worrying you. As much as I love this reunion, I should introduce you guys to the team," Leone interrupted. Izuku and Tatsumi looked at her. She then wrapped her arms around them as she dragged them back to the night raid base. As they walked around the base, they stopped by what looked to be a common area where they saw a girl wearing a purple cheongsam. She had glasses on as she was reading a book. Izuku looked at the title of the book, 100 Ways to Cure Being an Airhead. Well, that's certainly unexpected. She then looked up from her book as she spotted the three. "Oh, Leone and the two new members," she greeted. "Hi, Shield," Leone waved. "We're not members," Tatsumi interjected. Shield then became confused as she looked at Leone. She sighed as she shrugged her shoulders. "I tried to convince them, but they wouldn't budge. Can you help?" Leone pleaded. "Wait, I don't remember ever being asked to." Well, you know where our base is, then we'll have to kill you, she interrupted Izuku. Tatsumi and Izuku then shivered as they couldn't tell if she was serious or not. She then smiled at them. Just think about it, okay? Tatsumi nodded as Izuku just awkwardly smiled. Leon, why did you bring these guys in here? A voice called out. They turned to see a girl with pink pigtails as she wore a small pink dress. Come on, Maine, they're one of us now, Leon stated. She then looked at both of them, up to down. She then scoffed and turned around. Nope, I can't accept this. They're clearly not clothed in the same experience as us, she berated them. What? Tatsumi gritted his teeth, clearly annoyed by the girl's comment. Izuku, though, wasn't affected by her words because she was right about him. He could never kill people even if he wanted to. He just couldn't. HMPH, the girl now named Maine crossed her arm. Ah, don't worry about her, Tatsumi. That's just how she greets new members, Leon reassured him. Training area. As Leon continued to show the two around as they arrived at a training area. As they walked by, they saw a man that was bulked up. Izuku watched the man in amazement as the man swung his pole arm with quick pace, but it was also precise and controlled as dust flew around him. The man had black hair that was combed into a pompadour. As the man then brought the pole arm back and swung it forward as he created a wave of dust as the wind blew against the three that were watching. Tatsumi was stunned by the performance that the man did. The man then relaxed a bit as he turned around only to see the three watching him. Ah, well, if it isn't the ones we picked up the other night, the man called out. Tatsumi and Izuku clearly didn't understand what he meant because they didn't recognize him at all. Oh, you guys have only seen me in my armor, he informed. Izuku then put the piece together as the man was the one in the armor. It's a pleasure to meet you both. My name is Bulat, he greeted as he brought his hand out. Yeah, likewise, Tatsumi shook his hand. He's gay, Leon blurted out. Tatsumi froze as Izuku jumped and turned to Leon. Awa, don't give them the wrong idea, yet, he slurred. He didn't deny it, Izuku thought. Tatsumi then quickly pulled his hand away as Bulat laughed. In the forest, there was a hot spring, but a man was perched behind a bush as he had binoculars with him. This is Sis's bathing time. I'll do anything to see that smoking hot body of hers, the man cried out. Oh, then how about 2 broken fingers? Leon appeared behind him. The man then froze as he turned pale. Ah. Leon then pinned him down as she grabbed his arm and held him down on the ground. You never learn, do you, Lubba? Oh, this idiot's name is Lubbock. She introduced him as Lubbock was trying to escape. Izuku was then reminded of a familiar grape-headed boy. Izuku thought they could be friends, probably though. Lubbock then looked at Izuku. Oh, hey man, it's been a while. Oh, he grunted. Izuku waved as he listed the members of this band of assassins. A complete airhead, a aggressive mean pink girl, a gay-built guy, and a pervert, while including the lioness. Izuku questioned the group as it was quite odd to see this from a group of assassins. By the rive on the outskirts of the base, as they walked by a river as they walked along the side. Alrighty, one more member, Leon stated. I think I had enough today, Tatsumi groaned as he walked behind her as Izuku walked beside him. Izuku felt hungry as he hadn't eaten all day. Aw, come on, Tatsumi. Don't worry, this one is a cutie, so don't stare too much, she warned. As they approached a campfire where a giant bird was being roasted and a girl with long, deep black hair sitting in front of it as she ate a chicken leg. Hi, AceAkuma, Leon greeted her. HM, she hummed. In what way is that cute? Tatsumi exclaimed. Izuku's sweat dropped as he watched the girl eat the chicken leg. Wait, she's eating an evil bird. She killed it by herself? Tatsumi asked. Izuku questioned the name of the giant bird as he sighed. Here, Leon, AceAkuma then tossed a chicken leg to her as Leon grabbed it. Thanks, AceAkuma, she thanked her. Akane then looked at the two as Tatsumi gulped at her gaze while Izuku just froze. "Are you two going to join?" she asked them. Tatsumi snapped out of it. "We haven't decided." "Then I can't share my meat with you too," she stated. Tatsumi then scowled as Izuku just sweat dropped. "Hey Akane, why is everyone acting so weird today?" Leon asked. "That's because the boss is back," she answered. Izuku perked up as he heard that they had a boss. Leon walked around the fire as Tatsumi followed her. Izuku was going to follow, but then a hand grabbed his right hand. Izuku widened his eyes as he turned towards Akane. She stared at him intently. Izuku froze on the direct contact. "How's your head?" she asked. Izuku then raised a brow at the sudden question. It's fine. Why?" he asked. She looked at him for a few seconds, then let go as she shook her head. "It's nothing," she replied. "Grog." Izuku turned, only to see Leon being dragged on the ground. "I told you to control this behavior before, Leon," a voice called out behind the fire. Izuku walked up to Tatsumi to see a middle-aged woman with a mechanical arm as her 8th arm, and she wore an eye patch on her right eye. She had gray hair with blue eyes as she puffed a cigarette. I got it. Now can you stop with the noise?" Leon pleaded. She was then let go as the woman turned towards Tatsumi and Izuku. "Who are these guys?" she asked. Leon got up and placed her hands on Tatsumi's and Izuku's shoulder. "Oh, these are our new recruits," she answered. "We didn't accept it yet," Tatsumi interjected. The woman stared at the lioness intently. "Do they show promise?" she questioned. Leon looked at her with a serious smile. "They do," she answered confidently. It went silent as they could only hear the crackling of the fire. Then Leon broke the silence. "Plus, Greenie right here has a Tegu himself." Now intrigued, the woman was surprised. "Oh, is that so?" She then turned to Izuku as she stared him in the eye. Izuku flinched as he looked back at her. It felt like hours as Izuku and the woman continued to stare at each other. "All right then," the woman got up. "Akane, gather the others," she ordered. Akane stood up and nodded. "Come with me, you two. I'd like to hear your stories. Oh, and if you need to know, my name is Negenda. A pleasure to meet you both," the woman smirked. She then walked ahead of them. Tatsumi looked at Izuku. Izuku then gulped as he nodded and followed behind the woman. This is going to be a long day, Izuku thought. Izuku and Tatsumi stood in the middle of the room as Negenda sat on a chair in front of them while the other members of Night Raid surrounded them. "All right, I think I understand your situation, Tatsumi. Izuku, so how about it? Will you join us?" Negenda offered. "Do." "No," Izuku firmly replied, cutting Tatsumi off. Negenda looked at Izuku intently as everyone else was surprised by how fast Izuku replied. Negenda smiled. "And why is that, Izuku?" "Because I can't and will not kill people," he replied. His gaze remained firm as he looked straight at her. "Oh, come on, Greenie. You are seriously wasting your potential," Leon spoke up. Izuku looked at Leon as he gazed an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, but I can't kill people," Izuku stated. "Izuku, the people that brought you in tried to deceive you and Tatsumi, those scum in the capital. There are more people that are just as bad as the ones you met," Bulat informed him. Izuku, still resilient, shook his head. "I can't, no matter how many times you ask me. Even if they are bad people, I still can't kill them," Izuku rejected. "And what? Report those scum to the authorities? They are as corrupt as the people who are doing it. The police are just as dirty as the scum in the Empire," Main blurted. Izuku stood there feeling the front of their reasoning, but still Izuku couldn't kill people. He just couldn't. All he wanted in life was to save people. Negenda looked at the boy as he felt conflicted. She then turned her gaze to Tatsumi. "What about you, Tatsumi? What are your thoughts about this?" Negenda asked the brunette. Tatsumi jumped a bit as he looked at Negenda. "So, you guys kill the bad guys?" he asked. Negenda nodded. "If you put it that way, then yes." Tatsumi then smiled and turned to Izuku. Then I don't see the problem, Izuku. They're just helping people by being heroes. What's wrong with that? Izuku looked at him as if he said something really dumb. The rest of Night Raid started to laugh except for Akuma. Tatsumi, we are far from heroes, Bulat replied. We do help people, but that doesn't mean that our actions are justified, Leon responded. Once we're done with our jobs, we'll die in the end for our crimes, Bulat stated. So, I ask again, hearing what you've heard, Tatsumi, will you join us? Negenda asked. Izuku looked at Negenda in question. He felt that she gave up on asking him to join them. Do we get paid? Tatsumi asked. Negenda nodded. We do get funds. In order for us to keep running things here, the Revolutionary Army funds us in order for us to get intel and snuff out people of authority in the wretched place. Tatsumi then looked down, then up at her again. All I wanted is to save my village, but hearing what the Empire has been doing is cruel and unjust. Losing my friends in the process. Tatsumi clenched his fists. Izuku solemnly looked at him. For some reason he knew Tatsumi's answer. So I have no other choice but to join, so I'll do it. Tatsumi looked at Negenda with determination. Negenda smiled and brought her metallic hand out. Well then, Tatsumi, welcome to the path of carnage. Tatsumi sighed as he looked at Izuku with an apologetic look. Izuku shook his head, signaling that he was not upset with his decision. Now then, what do we do with Greenie? Leon asked. Negenda looked at Izuku. You still refuse even though your friend accepted. Izuku firmly nodded. Damn, does that mean we have to put him into the workshop? Lubbock blurted. Negenda shook her head. No, I'll... Before she could say anything, Lubbock's strings on his gloves started to move as he looked down urgently. We have intruders, about 12 of them, he reported. Negenda looked at the team as the tension felt heavy in the room. Izuku and Tatsumi felt it quickly as everyone had changed their expressions. You know what to do, leave no survivors, Negenda ordered. They all grabbed their weapons and rushed out of the room. What are you doing standing there for Tatsumi? This is your first assignment. Now go, she ordered him. Tatsumi flinched as he grabbed his sword and followed the rest outside. Izuku was about to follow too. Not you, Izuku. You're not a part of the team, she stopped him. Izuku stopped in his tracks as he turned. He looked at her. Is it really necessary to kill them? He asked. Negenda nodded. If they spill information about our base, then we have to find another hideout that will take some time. Izuku was about to interject, but she wouldn't let him. Izuku, I know that you hate the fact of killing people, but here, it is the only option that the Empire has put us in, Negenda explained. Negenda stood up as she looked down at the hero. So tell me, Izuku, who are you really? She gazed at him. He flinched as he had a worried look. What do you mean? I find it hard to believe your tegu is built into your gloves or your iron soles, Negenda stated. Izuku gulped as he looked at her. Crap. She's perceptive. She figured out my quirk. Izuku, were you an experiment? She deduced. Izuku widened his eyes as he was surprised by her answer. What? Hold on. Why did you come to that conclusion? He exclaimed. Negenda lifted her hand to her chin. So then how does your power work? Or where did you get your power? Izuku thought about how to answer. Should she tell her about One for All or keep it on the down low? He went for the latter as it was best to keep it a secret. My power awakened when I was attacked by thugs. It helped a little, but in the end, it had backlashes with it. I can put explosive power into my limbs that create power strikes, but if I use my full power, it will shatter my limbs in an instant. So my mentor trained me to control this power. I can only control 20% so far, he explained, half lying. Negenda looked at the boy with a hardened gaze. Izuku gulped as he hoped she would take the lie. I know when I see a lie, Izuku, Negenda sighed. Izuku's breath hitched as she called him out. But I'd like to dig into your story. I'll let it slide just this once, but in the future, you're going to tell me, Negenda stated. Izuku flinched as she gave him her stern look. But I also believe what you told me about your power was somewhat true, she confirmed. The fact remains that we can't let you leave here, she stated. Izuku then looked at her. So am I going to work at the workshop that Lubbock stated? Izuku asked. She shook her head. I knew you didn't kill people, just by looking into your eyes. Izuku widened his eyes. My eyes. She nodded. A sense of justice and heroism, a look I haven't seen in a long time, she sighed. Negenda then walked up to Izuku. From what I heard from AceAkuma and Leon, your powers could help the Revolutionary Army in fighting the corruption in the Empire. Izuku looked at her. Your power could help people, so I have another job for you. Become our auxiliary, she stated. Izuku raised his brow. Auxiliary? Negenda nodded. It's a position where you are sent on search and rescue missions and delivering while assisting and saving allies in a critical situation. Izuku nodded in understanding. Also, you won't be involved in the assassinations, she continued. Izuku widened his eyes as he looked down at the floor. It's your choice, however, Izuku, she stated. Izuku closed his eyes, remembering the visions that he had on his abrupt journey here, the corpses he saw in the shed, Tatsumi losing 2 of his friends. More people were suffering out there because of a corrupt empire. Izuku clenched his fist. He wanted to go home. That's all he wanted to do ever since he came here. But now, hearing about the empire, he just couldn't ignore the people that are desperate for help, people who needed saving. Izuku then looked up at Negenda with determination. I'll do it. I'll be your auxiliary, he firmly replied. Negenda smiled as she brought her hand out. Then welcome to Night Raid Auxiliary. Izuku nodded. Not only will he help people, but he can help Tatsumi as well, as he promised to Iyasu. He then took his scarred hand and shook her hand. As they let go, the rest of the team came back as Tatsumi was covered in scratches and dirt. Izuku widened his eyes at Tatsumi's state. AceAkuma walked up to Negenda as she reported Tatsumi's performance. Well, it would seem, Tatsumi, you need a lot of work, so you'll be training with the members, Negenda stated. Tatsumi nodded. Leon then walked up as she then pointed to Izuku. What about Greenie, boss? What is he going to do? He will be training with Tatsumi as well, she explained. Leon smiled. Oh, so Green Bean here has finally cracked. Negenda shook his head. Nope, he still refuses to kill, so he'll be our auxiliary from now on, she stated. Everyone looked at Izuku. Auxiliary, huh? Damn, it's been a while since we had one, Lubbock blurted. Izuku flinched. Wait, what happened to the other one? Lubbock shook his head. Ah, it's best if you don't know, he grinned. Izuku shivered. What the hell did I bring myself into, he thought. Negenda then looked at AceAkuma. AceAkuma, you'll be in charge of these 2 for the time being. AceAkuma nodded as Tatsumi flinched and looked at her. If they become a nuisance, you have permission to kill them, she stated. Izuku and Tatsumi flinched as she said that. Mimechem, AceAkuma hummed. Great, just great, Tatsumi groaned. Negenda then looked at the rest of the team. All right, all of you are dismissed. Izuku followed the rest outside of the conference room. Izuku looked out the window to see it was already nightfall. Izuku then walked towards the direction of where he was presumably staying. But before he could do that, he caught AceAkuma's gaze at him. He flinched as he wasn't expecting her to stare at him like that. She then turned and walked away. Izuku wondered why she was staring at him, but decided it was a pretty long day. He walked into his room as he looked at the bedroom, remembering his room at UA. He looked outside of the window. I'm going to be here for a while, huh? He muttered. Izuku then walked to a closet as they apparently had spare change of clothes that fit his size. Izuku changed out of the hero suit and put on a dark gray t-shirt and a pair of black shorts. He then slipped out of his red shoes and fell onto the bed. He needed this as today was very eventful, and he wondered what would come tomorrow. The next day, he could hear a knock at his door as he opened his eyes and rubbed it. He then lifted himself up as he got off the bed. He didn't know what time it was, but he looked out the window to see the sun was still rising, so it would look to be 6 or 5 in the morning. He walked to his door as he then opened the door. At his door was Akame, dressed the same, black-collared shirt with the white collar and the red skirt with her black leggings. Izuku looked at her as she stood there. "Akame? What's wrong?" he asked. "Breakfast. We need to make breakfast for the team," she stated. Izuku nodded as he grabbed his red shoes and slipped them on as he walked out. Luckily for him, he was taught the basics from his mother about cooking and a little from Sado. As the two walked in the kitchen, they saw Tatsumi standing there as well, yawning. "Okay, what will be cooking today?" Tatsumi asked. Akame then grabbed ingredients out of the walk-in as she then placed them on the counter. "Tatsumi, peel the potatoes and Izuku chop the green onions. I'll tend to the meat," she ordered. Izuku could have sworn he saw a drool coming out of her mouth. A few hours later. "I have to thank Iyasu and Seo for helping me cook, but I didn't sign up for this," Tatsumi groaned. "More, please." "Oh, can have seconds as well." "Ooh, me too." "Seconds." "Oi, newbies, seconds." Tatsumi gritted his teeth in annoyance as the rest of the team enjoyed their breakfast. Izuku awkwardly smiled as he cleaned some dishes. Izuku and Tatsumi already ate since they prepared the meal quite fast, but Akame, however, was still eating as she ate out of the fruit basket at the counter. "It can't be helped. I'm responsible for breakfast, lunch, and dinner," Akame stated. "Are you sure you didn't just want to eat as much as you want?" Tatsumi blurted. "I don't know what you are talking about," she denied. "You are a terrible liar," Tatsumi sighed as he looked at Izuku. Izuku was washing the dishes, but without a hint of annoyance. As Izuku finished, he started to rack the plates so they could dry. Akame walked by as she wanted to find ingredients for lunch. She then turned to Izuku and noticed the scarred hand on his right. She then trailed her gaze up as she noticed a massive scar that was from the bottom of his biceps to what appeared to be his shoulders. As Izuku was still minding his business, Akame then walked up to Izuku as she abruptly grabbed his right hand. Izuku jumped at the sudden action as he turned as he now noticed the red-eyed assassin examining his right arm. Izuku went into a blushing mess as Akame inspected the scars. So close, Izuku thought. She also traced her fingers along the scars. Izuku froze as he didn't even move an inch. Akame then rolled up the sleeve to check furthermore as the massive scar on his right arm was to his shoulder. "These scars are an overuse of your tegu, isn't it?" she deduced. Izuku widened his eyes as she figured out just by examining it with one glance. Yeah, Izuku answered. Akame looked at him as their eyes met. "You shouldn't use a tegu that harms your own body," she stated. For some reason Izuku felt a hint of worry come out of her voice. Izuku then froze again as he noticed how beautiful her eyes looked close up. Don't worry. I haven't used it reckless. I have better control now, so yeah," Izuku stuttered as he looked away from her. Akame then let go of his hand as she looked at him, then turned around to go to the walk-in. Izuku sighed in relief as he then went to put the plates up. "Well, someone is completely red," Lubbock blurted out. Izuku flinched as he looked at the light green-haired man as he was leaning on the counter where he could see Lubbock in front of him. "Wait, hold on, this isn't what?" he muttered as Lubbock started to laugh. "Man, you really have no experience with girls, do you?" he deduced. Izuku just awkwardly smiled and chuckled. "Hey Lubbock, let's go," Main called out. He then waved Izuku by as he followed the rest out. "Where are they going?" Izuku asked. "Some assignment," he heard Tatsumi bellow. Izuku turned to see Tatsumi annoyed even further. While Izuku was being inspected by Akame and teased by Lubbock, Tatsumi was taking the brunt of Main's berating. At this point, he wanted to strangle the pink-haired girl. "Tatsumi, Izuku, we are out of tuna. Let's go hunt some targets," she stated. Izuku looked at her then sighed, "So this is what I signed up for. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through What if Deku was teleported into the world of despair? I hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did. A big shout out to AceAkuma for crafting such a compelling story. Don't forget to check out their profile on FanfictionNet for more amazing works. The link is in the description below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to What If Deku 2 for more fascinating explorations into the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we're always excited to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you guys in the next video.